So in your annual conference presentation, you talked a lot about how for a lot of young people, there isn't a large gap between the secular and kind of the church worlds. So what are some of the spaces that you have experienced God in the so-called secular world?
I think when we look for God in wherever it might be, we will find God there. So I think we can see God in movies, we can see God in music, we can see God in poetry, we can see God in art and paintings. I think God is everywhere. And so when we look at songs on the radio, like recent pop songs, we can hear themes of seeing that you're beautiful and knowing that you're stronger than what people tell you you are. And so we have to look through some of the negative things that we see, but I think that we can see a lot of positive things in there too. And so when we look for them, we will find them.
Yeah, I know in my own life it's been great to be able to find God in certain places. I've always been just amazed by the amount of creation and all of this, all the beauty that can be found in that. I remember a while back I was actually at Rocky Mountain National Park, and we had a meeting there, but we got to go up to some of the highest points in the mountains and just being able to look over like this huge chunk of earth and being able to experience God in that way. And there was nothing specifically spiritual about that, but there wasn't a big church up there with this fancy steeple or anything. It was just a national park, but there was some kind of presence of God that could definitely be felt there. So I can see, and I've never even thought about hearing God in those kinds of pop songs or anything like that. It's not that crazy, but yeah, finding God in the secular world is it's tough, but it's a great thing as well.
I think we see it in poetry a lot, poetry that speaks about creation, especially describing the trees or the sky or the sun, that those are things that God created. And so even if it's not a specifically Christian poem or painting or whatever it might be that expresses the beauty of creation, we can see God in that because we know our Creator.
Yeah, great. So in your presentation, you also said that some of these non-traditional places of finding God might be onto something. Can you talk about what that means?
Yeah, so I think that we tend to limit God because we limit where we see God. And so if we start looking other places than just in our churches on Sunday mornings, I think that it opens us up to a whole new side of who God is, and we get to learn more about God's character and who we are in the midst of that. And so I think using our gifts, we all have different gifts and abilities, and when we're able to use those and really grab onto the things that we're able to do and the things we're able to create, when we look to those things, we can learn all sorts of things.
Great. So going on from there, how can we faithfully blend that kind of sacred and church world? Because obviously you're a pastor, so you have one foot in that church world as well. Yeah. So how do we kind of bring those two things together, those two worlds together?
That's a great question. I think, I'm not really sure. I don't know the answer, okay. But I think that it comes in accepting that it's okay to be in both worlds. We live in both worlds. And so as a pastor, I encourage people to live out their faith all the time. And so that doesn't just mean when you're at church on Sunday morning or when you're on a mission trip or you're at the church for a certain function, but that's in all aspects of your life. And so I think that we have to start blending some of the secular in with what we do because it's part of who we are. It's part of the lives of our neighbors and the lives of the people that we interact with all the time. And so being able to relate to people in those things, we need to be aware of them and aware of how we see God in them.
Well, that's great, because we started out talking a lot about relationship and how that's an important part of young adults. And I guess now I'm hearing again, we get back to relationships, talking about being in a relationship with people. You have to bring in that outside stuff in some kind of way and at least find ways to interact with it. So another big question is how does a church show that it's open to those kinds of things? Because I know a lot of young adults who hear that, who are outside the church, probably would not think that that's what the church is known for, is taking these kind of ideas that come in the secular world and being able to find God and meaning in them as well. So how does the church signify it is open to those kinds of ideas?
I think we just need to do it. I think it's not about talking about it. It's not about making a plan on how to do it, but just trying it, just doing it. Allowing one of your young people to read a poem that they wrote for something for school, or just being more open and showing that on Sunday morning. So instead of, it's really great to talk about it, and it's helpful to have conversations around being more open, but we just need to be more open and to just try some things out. And I think sometimes things work and sometimes things don't work. And so knowing what works in your specific worship space is really important.